Hey guys, tonight we slip into the hidden alcoves of ancient Japan, where the whisper of silk against bare skin carries secrets older than the cherry blossoms themselves. Picture paper lanterns glowing in a tatami-lined pavilion, the air thick with the scent of incense, and something undeniably electric, like the anticipation just before a summer storm. You probably won't survive this well, at least you might blush. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also drop your location and local time in the comments, so I know when you're sneaking a midnight listen. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward on moonlit stones, sandals slapping softly, and remember that illustrious moment when a Heian courtier allegedly sent love poems by the light of fireflies. Historians still argue whether that ever happened, or if it was pure literary flair. But here's a mainstream fact: during the Jomon period, some clay figurines called dogu feature exaggerated female forms that hint at prehistoric fertility rites, and perhaps intimate ceremonies, mainstream historical fact. Meanwhile, a fringe theory posits they were used as prehistoric sex toys, carved by cave-dwelling craftsmen, quirky tidbit, though historians still argue whether that interpretation isn't a bit speculative. Your footsteps echo as you realize that even peasant huts had hidden corners for courtship. Yes, the rustic romance of rice farmers wasn't all straw and hard labor. Legend whispers that some yayoi couples exchanged simple bamboo tubes as love letters. Fringe tidbit, though historians still argue whether bamboo messages ever replaced scrolls. It's wild to think about, especially if you've ever tried texting your crush at 2 a.m. Good luck beating bamboo in reliability. A light joke drifts in. If only ancient one-liners could go viral like today's memes. Can you imagine samurai cat videos? 3 light jokes so far, and we're not even out of the pavilion. The intimacy of the era wasn't just behind closed screens. It was woven into poetry lullabies and courtly game nights where flirting was the ultimate amusement. Imagine participating in dango tasting contests. You like this dumpling, I like you, and watching a noble blush so hard it threatened to set his robe aflame. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You peer through sliding screens and glimpse lacquered writing boxes, each hinting at scribbled secrets between suitors. In the Heian era, poetry competitions served as courting rituals. A well-placed metaphor for a moonlit pond might earn you a date, or at least a polite curtsy. Historians still argue whether some metaphors were so obscure that participants pretended to understand them just to save face. Kind of like when your friend claims they totally understood that abstract poetry assignment in college, except these metaphors were scented with sandalwood. A second light joke drifts in. If you ever feel ignored, just write a haiku. Works every time, except when it doesn't. And yes, buried in those ornate scrolls, you'll find veiled references to midnight trysts and stolen hairpins left behind in dim corridors. One fringe anecdote tells of a court lady who dyed her kimono sleeves red so her lover could trace her path by the trail of petals. Historians still argue whether she was a genius marketer for early fashion or simply very committed to stalking. As you inch deeper, you step into a world where even temples had hidden chambers. Buddhist monks preach celibacy, yet rumors speak of secretive flower viewing gatherings that ended less than piously. One bizarre monastic tale involves a monk who supposedly crushed aphrodisiac herbs into his tea, though historians still argue whether he was conducting botanical research or just exceptionally bored. This mix of devotion and desire foreshadows the complex dance of taboo and tradition that defined ancient Japanese intimacy. A third light joke pops up: your morning coffee probably doesn't pair well with aphrodisiac herbs. Trust me, I tried. But this layering of ritual and romance shaped a landscape where sensuality could bloom like a lotus in a stone basin, deliberate, secretive, and infinitely poetic. You sense the hush of silk kimonos rustling, the faint click of gaiter sandals. Every detail amplifies the charged atmosphere of a society that whispered rather than shouted its desires. Let's wrap up this introduction with a final reminder. Ancient Japan's sexual culture wasn't some savage free-for-all. It was structured, coded, and suffused with symbolic meaning. From Jomon clay workshops to Heian poetry salons, Lovers found ways to express longing through gesture, gift, and metaphor. Historians still argue whether some of those coded gestures lost meaning over time, or whether they were just really bad at texting. So stay tuned as we unravel how those early clay figurines led to steamy Heian pillow books, and why a samurai might have consulted 5 different etiquette manuals before making the first move. Remember that pollen-dusty veranda, that scent of incense, and the gentle hum of anticipation in the night air. In Section 2, we'll dig into Jomon Jurassic-era artifacts and their surprisingly intimate secrets. You crouch beside a low wooden bench in a dimly lit pit, dwelling your fingertips, brushing the cool baked clay of a small figurine. This is a dog, a distinctive clay figure crafted during the Jomon period, circa 14,300 BCE, often with exaggerated hips, breasts, or abdomens, suggesting fertility or protection, mainstream historical fact. The rough cord-marked surface still bears faint impressions of rope patterns. The Jomon name itself means cord-marked. As you cradle this miniature form, you feel a strange reverence, as though you're touching the echo of someone's ancient heartbeat. Folklore whispers that these figures were buried with the sick, used in sympathetic magic to absorb illness, or perhaps even to encourage conception. One fringe tidbit claims that certain dogs were fashioned with detachable limbs, hinting they might have served as prehistoric action figures for frisky roleplay. Quirky tidbit. Imagine kids in 5000 BCE arguing over whether the tiny arm could be snapped off before bedtime. Bedtime play has always been complicated. You tilt the dog in the lamplight and notice tiny perforations where the eyes should be. Some archaeologists suggest these holes weren't for vision, but for threading ritual cords, allowing the figurine to be clothed in ceremonial textiles. Historians still argue whether dogs were worn by participants in fertility rites, or simply propped on altars to bless the harvest. Scholarly debate. Either way, you can almost hear the soft rustle of linen swathing these clay bodies. A light joke drifts into your mind. If this was an ancient prank, someone definitely deserved more than a like on their village newsletter. You shift your gaze to a taller, slender figurine, its arms raised above its head, in what might be jubilation, or perhaps a suggestive stretch after a long day of digging Karma's roots. Scholars remain divided. Was this pose a symbol of worship, or something more, a prehistoric yoga class gone rogue? Beyond the fertility interpretation, mainstream excavations at the Sanai Maruyama site revealed dog deliberately broken and then ritually buried, suggesting a killing ceremony to release their spirit. This practice underscores how intimate the relationship was between makers and their creations. You imagine ancient hands painstakingly shaping each curve before ceremonially shattering the figure, kind of like smashing a piñata, but with more existential angst. Here's another light joke. You've seen less drama at modern gender reveal parties. But while you chuckle internally, a chill tickles your spine. You're not just gazing at a relic, you're witnessing a cultural conversation about life's most private moments. Around you, the earth floor feels steady, but your mind drifts. Did a Jomon villager whisper secrets into the figurine's clay ear, hoping for a child they'd never meet? Historians still argue whether dogs served as confidants or invisible midwives. The pit dwelling's earthen walls hold more than figurines. Pottery shards with phallic motifs suggest an open acknowledgement of sexuality. One especially curious shard discovered in Hokkaido features a raised spiral pattern that some interpret as a stylized representation of the female form in motion, though skeptics argue it's mere decoration. Your ASMR senses tingle at the thought of antiquity's natural candor. Even without scrolls, the Jomon people found clay an eloquent canvas for desire. You lean in closer to another dog, this one sporting what looks like a perforated skirt. A leading theory posits that the holes once held fibrous reeds or hemp strands, effectively dressing the figure in ritual garments. If true, villagers may have draped these figurines in miniature robes made from nettle fibers. Imagine gifting your partner a knitted doll outfit. Today, jumpers aren't just for good luck, apparently. Third light joke: if only modern retailers sold ancient fertility dog, TM, in a gift-wrapped box with a bow. Yet beneath the humor lies a profound truth. These artifacts weren't mere toys or trinkets. They mediated sacred rites and personal yearnings. You sense the weight of generations refining each mold, firing each piece in smoky pit kilns. The crackle of flame must have filled the night air as hands pressed, pinched, and smoothed the wet clay into forms both human and divine. As you gently place the figurine back into its padded display, you consider the broader landscape. The Jomon era spanned over 10 millennia and saw dramatic shifts in climate subsistence and social structure. Yet the persistence of dog across regions implies a shared language of intimacy, a non-verbal vocabulary carved in earth and fire. Historians still argue whether this artistic consistency denotes a pan-Jomon spiritual network or simply convergent evolution of ideas. Your senses linger on the scent of charcoal and raw earth. The security of the wooden palisade beyond these walls contrasts sharply with the vulnerability implied by these small, rounded forms. Each dog seems to whisper reassurance, as if saying, "You're part of something grand, something eternal." Yet in another whisper, they remind you of humanity's perennial dance between concealment and disclosure. A final light joke flickers. If dog could text, they'd probably have an unread message count in the thousands. Love notes tend to pile up over 10,000 years. You stand pausing to imprint the scene in memory, the low beams, the muffled echo of your breath, the stillness broken only by the whispered hum of prescient longing. As you step out of the pit, dwelling back into the modern evening air, you carry more than clay dust. You carry a reminder that intimacy isn't new. It's as ancient as the first figurine pressed between creative fingers. In Section 3, we'll sow ourselves into yayoi fertility rites, where mating and farming intertwined in surprising ceremonies. You step through the threshold of a soggy rice paddy water, rippling around your ankles as the sun climbs higher. In the yayoi period, circa 300 BCE 300 CE rice cultivation transformed Japanese society, and with it, the rituals of life and love, mainstream historical fact. Fertility wasn't just a metaphor, it was an agricultural imperative. Farmers believed that ensuring the land bore grain and couples bore heirs were two sides of the same coin. You dab mud off your sandals, feeling the sticky earth cling like an eager courtier. At dawn, villagers gathered for the Taue Matsuri, the rice planting festival, a ceremony still held in some regions today. Women wearing woven reed skirts would wade into the flooded fields, chanting prayers for bountiful harvests and ostensibly for randy romances. One quirky fringe tidbit suggests that couples paired off and exchanged fleeting kisses mid-planting, believing that the union of bodies would mirror the union of seed and soil. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such public displays were sanctioned community building or just village gossip amplified over centuries. You watch as the chief farmer dips his hands into the muddy water, then touches his wife's forehead in a blessing gesture. Historians still argue whether this gesture originally symbolized divine endorsement of their fertility or was simply a pragmatic declaration. Don't blame me if we don't get a good crop. The moment is thick with expectation. The ring of drums, the call of cranes overhead, and the gentle murmur of onlookers. Your heart thumps like a taiko drum, half in excitement, half in mud-born dread. Did I remember to wear clean socks? A light joke bubbles up. Nothing says romance like wet calf-high boots and riverbank mosquitoes. You shift your gaze to small wooden phallic carvings known as inazo, literally rice phallus, stuck upright in the earth like awkward little totems. These carved rods were believed to channel divine sexual energy into the paddies, ensuring the rice plants grew tall and straight. Imagine if today's gardeners used inflatable pink tubes instead. Instagram would explode. The chant swells, Inazo kosei mei sei koe, grant forth life, prosper offspring. You join the refrain on the third repetition, marveling at how the simple act of chanting can unite a community into a shared moment of hopeful delirium. Historians still argue whether the inazo were purely symbolic or once functioned as crude irrigation tools, repurposed as fertility icons. You can almost hear ancient debates echoing through time. It's art. No, it's plumbing. A second light joke flits by. If only Amazon delivered divine irrigation tools we'd call prime for phallus-shaped sprinklers. But even as you smile, you feel the solemnity of the rite. This isn't carnival. It's survival. After the ceremony, Women would offer decorated earthenware cups of sake to the farmers who took careful sips before passing the cup to their spouses. Mainstream accounts note that sake rituals underscored communal bonds and hinted at intimate unions to come in private quarters. Mainstream historical fact. One fringe rumor claims that some villages held wine and dine sessions for pairs of young adults right after the matsuri, complete with singing contests where lullaby-like melodies concealed risque lyrics. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether these after-parties were elite privileges or widespread peasant practices. Either way, it sounds like your college reunion, but with more mud. You crouch on the bank as elders demonstrate the proper way to lay seedlings, pinch the tender shoots between thumb and forefinger, then slide them into the mud at just the right angle. Your fingers tremble, either from excitement or the cold water, and an elder chuckles, "Ease up, or you'll plant your thumb instead of rice." A third light joke tickles your mind. That's one way to grow your thumbs. DIY gardening. Beyond the paddy shrine, maidens Miko perform dances with slender wands adorned with paper streamers. Their movements mimic the sway of rice stalks in the breeze, a vision of grace meant to entice both gods and lovers. Mainstream records describe these kagura dances as invocations of agricultural deities. Mainstream historical fact. Yet one odd anecdote claims the streamers were dipped in aphrodisiac oils, a claim historians still argue for lack of residue samples. Scholarly debate. As you stand, the sunlight glinting on water droplets, you feel the synergy of earth ritual and human longing. The paddy becomes a mirror for desire, muddy dynamic and demanding patience. Imagine if Tinder required you to serenade the fields before swiping. Match rates might plummet, but at least dates would be memorable. Carrying a small wooden paddler carved with rice motifs, you leave the field and pass a line of straw effigies representing deities, or some say blank slate lovers, waiting to be animated by intention. One fringe legend suggests couples whispered vows to these effigies, then burned them in a bonfire to send their promises skyward. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the effigy burning was literal or allegorical, a smoky metaphor for letting go. The cool breeze carries the scent of steamed rice and pine smoke from the village hearth. You wipe your brow, tasting grit and exhilaration. This festival fused the practical and the romantic, planting seeds in the ground and in each other's hearts. As you wander back toward the torii gate marking the village's boundary, you carry a kernel of understanding in yayoi. Japan, love and agriculture were inseparable partners in the dance of survival. Next, we'll slip into the silk-draped Heian courts, where romance took on an artful, poetic life far from muddy fields. You slip through the lacquered screen doors of a Heian-era shinden, the scent of iris-scented incense curling around your senses as silken curtains flutter in the late afternoon breeze. The soft click of your clogs against polished wood echoes through the pavilion, where courtiers in layered junihito robes glide like living brushstrokes. In this world of refined subtleties, romance unfolded as an art form steeped in poetry and ritual. Mainstream historical fact. You drift toward a low writing desk, where a noblewoman reclines on embroidered cushions, her ebony hair spilling like a midnight waterfall. She holds a slender brush and a roll of washi paper, the very tools used to compose the pillow book of Sei Shonagon, a collection of observations, gossip, and candid musings. Mainstream historical fact. You almost expect her to glance up with a knowing smile, but her expression remains enigma wrapped in silk. A light joke surfaces. If she offered you a poem, you'd probably respond with a LOL in kanji. Nearby, another courtier passes a tiny lacquered box to his secret paramour, who slips it beneath her obi-rumor, says it contains a miniature perfume vial, scented with plum blossoms, intended to linger like a whispered promise. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such boxes doubled as early lockets, or were merely ornate inkpots for impromptu love letters. You settle on a tatami mat as dusk deepens and the garden outside shimmers with the glow of fireflies. Tripartite rooms frame views of raked gravel gardens that mirror the sky, reinforcing the Heian ideal of merging interior emotion with exterior beauty. In these halls, exchanging poems, waka was the ultimate flirtation. A well-crafted tanka on tender feelings could secure an invitation to an intimate moon viewing party. Mainstream historical fact. Your heart flutters like a startled sparrow. A light joke drifts in imagining dating apps, where instead of swipe right, you recite a 5-line poem dating would take forever, but at least ghosting would be poetic. You notice a lacquered writing chest carved with cranes. Some fringe scholars claim these chests hid secret compartments where smuggled erotic sketches were stashed, feeding the Heian court's penchant for discreet titillation, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether erotic art circulated widely among nobles or remained confined to whispered circles. The distant murmur of a koto strings arrangement drifts through open corridors. You follow the melody to a veranda where two ladies perform a game of Uta Away's poetry, matching fanning themselves with carved wooden fans. Each fan bears verses hinting at longing. A line about cherry petals drifting on a pond might mask an unspoken invitation to a midnight rendezvous. You imagine the hush behind those fans, the nervous flush when a poem strikes the perfect chord. A second light joke flits by. If only Tinder allowed you to send haiku. Roses are red, feels so passé. You lean in as one courtier dips plum wine from a ceramic cup, offering a taste to a favorite consort. The sweet tang warms your throat, and you feel the electric charge of shared indulgence. Mainstream diaries record that Heian nobles often sipped wine under blossoming cherry trees, linking libation with courtship. Mainstream historical fact. Yet one odd anecdote alleges some courtiers spiked each other's cups with mild soporifics to slip away for clandestine meetings. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect genuine intrigue or later moralizing embellishments. A soft breeze ruffles your hair as the last rays of sun kiss the painted screen walls. You spot a lacquer tray bearing a small pile of folded love notes, each sealed with wax imprinted by a personal seal. Some even scented with musk derived from deer glands, quirky tidbit. Imagine a deer-scented love note arriving at your door today. College roommate's reaction. Dude, that's weird. You stifle a laugh, but glance around to ensure no one saw. Your fingers itch to trace the flowing calligraphy, but you remember the ritual: never touch a sealed missive, never read a poem aloud in public, and above all, never let emotions spill beyond the confines of etiquette. This restrained tension fueled Heian passion. The sweetest kisses came after long games of poetic cat and mouse. You almost hear the soft laughter of silk robes as lovers steal away to moonlit corridors. A third light joke bubbles up. It's like dating in slow motion, polite, poetic, and with zero gift support. Yet that deliberate pace magnified every glance, every carefully chosen word. You feel the weight of centuries in the hush between chants of cicadas outside. Each verse held multitudes of meaning, each fan flick a flirtatious flag. You rise and step into the garden at twilight, where a lone magnolia tree blooms. Petals drift down around you like perfumed snow. Here in Heian, Japan, love was encoded in metaphor and gesture, from the curve of a sleeve to the cadence of a whispered poem. Historians still argue whether some metaphorical references, like comparing a lover's sigh to an autumn wind, were private codes understood only by initiated pairs, or simply flowery embellishments. As fireflies swirl above the reflecting pond, you carry with you the elegance and restraint of courtly romance. You sense how every ritual, every coded line sharpened desire until it glowed like the lanterns guiding lovers through shadowed corridors. Next, in Section 5, we'll explore how Buddhist sexual taboos intersected with human desire, revealing the unexpected ways spirituality and sensuality coexisted in ancient Japan. You step across the cool stone threshold of a temple courtyard, incense smoke curling like lazy snakes around moss-covered lanterns. The early morning mist clings to your skin as you approach a group of robed monks chanting sutras beneath a blooming plum tree. Here in the Kaidan Inn of Nara, Buddhist doctrine reshaped attitudes towards sex and desire, and yet human longing persisted in even the most austere cloisters. Mainstream historical fact. The towering cedar pillars bear inscriptions warning of karmic consequences for indulgence in carnal pleasures. You run a fingertip along the carved kanji and shiver at their solemn promise. Abstain from sensual desire, for attachment breeds suffering. Yet a fringe tale whispers that some monks covertly harnessed certain plants like safflower blossoms to craft potent tinctures, promising ecstatic visions of enlightenment. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether these herbal brews were genuine sacraments or simply illicit escapes from celibate tedium. You inhale the cool air tinged with pine and earth as the monks move in slow, deliberate procession. One elder pauses, offering you a simple bowl of tea. You sip its bitter warmth and feel a gentle buzz in your veins, as if the tea carries not just caffeine, but a trace of daring. A light joke pops into your mind. Modern kombucha doesn't give you enlightenment, but I'd settle for avoiding existential dread on Monday mornings. The temple garden beyond the cloister is laid out in symmetrical perfection, raked gravel, representing the ocean's waves, carefully trimmed azalea bushes, like manicured applause. But hidden behind a low bamboo fence, a small alcove reveals painted murals depicting the 6 realms, including the realm of desire populated by voluptuous figures in ecstatic embrace, mainstream historical fact. Follow the winding path, and you find access forbidden to lay worshippers. Historians still argue whether these erotic frescoes served as moral warnings or as secret devotional art for initiated priests. A second light joke flutters. It's like a restricted adult section in a library, except instead of romance novels, it's spiritual cautionary tales with extra flair. You press your cheek against the cool bamboo peeking through slats to glimpse a fresco of entwined figures whose faces are serenely blissful. The scene feels less lurid and more sacred, a reminder that asceticism and sensuality were braided threads in Japan's spiritual tapestry. As you step back, a novice monk approaches, bowing deeply. He hands you a small scroll sealed with vermilion ink. Opening it reveals a single line of calligraphy. Attachment is the perfume. Release the empty bowl. You trace the elegant strokes and wonder whether the phrase hints at forbidden knowledge or simply poetic musing. Scholar debates swirl. Historians still argue whether such scrolls were distributed to promote celibacy or to tease monks with coded references to ecstatic practices. You wander beneath a torii gate splashed with morning light and find a hidden alcove where a group of monks recite the flower sermon. Legend says that during this teaching, the Buddha held up a white flower and smiled, imparting wisdom beyond words, mainstream historical fact. Some fringe scholars suggest that this silent sermon was actually a metaphor for direct mystical experience, perhaps even erotic union with the divine, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether this tale emphasizes transcending language or hints at the sublime nature of physical intimacy. A third light joke drifts in. Next time someone says, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," just show them a flower and see if they get enlightened. Yet the hush around you feels charged. Every petal seems to pulse with hidden significance. You kneel on a tatami mat inside a meditation hall, watching monks sit cross-legged in perfect posture. Their faces are serene, yet in the quiet, you catch the faint echo of human breath, reminding you that even those who vow abstinence breathe and beat with untamed desire. Beyond the meditation space, an open veranda reveals intricate wood carvings beneath the eaves, depictions of the Bodhisattva Maitreya, reclining hands folded over the stomach, in a posture sometimes compared to repose after conjugal union, mainstream historical fact. One playful fringe interpretation claims these sculptures served as hidden invitations for monastic novices to embrace compassion through physical experience, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether Maitreya's pose symbolizes restful transcendence or a coded nod to erotic awakening. You rise and walk among stone lanterns carved with lotus petals, the Buddhist symbol of purity arising from mud. Each lantern stands as a testament to the paradox of desire, from murky origin springs radiant flower. A light joke drifts. My dating life could use the same symbolism, emerging beautiful after all that emotional mud. Despite the levity, you sense the temple's paradox, strict rules, framing a space where human longing and spiritual aspiration coexisted in uneasy harmony. A sudden rustle draws your gaze to a secluded courtyard lined with bamboo mats. Here, whispered accounts tell of flower viewing nights, where select monks under moonlight would exchange glances and lightly brush fingertips in silent communion, sending ripples through the monastic order. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether these gatherings constituted erotic license or simple aesthetic appreciation. You imagine clandestine glances, hearts pounding beneath saffron robes, a silent testament to desire's persistence. Dusk approaches, and lantern light flickers against painted sliding doors, revealing silhouettes of pairs seated in contemplative proximity. You settle on a wooden bench, inhaling the crisp air scented with wisteria. The monk's final chant fades, and a hush settles like velvet. You realize that in this realm, desire was neither fully denied nor wholly embraced, but held in tension, a sacred dilemma echoing through each aisle and alcove. As you prepare to leave, you touch the cool stone of the gatepost and glimpse one final mural of entwined bamboo stalks, an eternal metaphor for unity and separation. The path out of the temple winds through a grove of ancient cryptomeria, their towering forms watching like silent sentinels. You step into twilight, carrying a fragment of the monastic paradox in your chest, the knowledge that body and spirit, devotion and desire are inseparable notes in the same melody. Next, in Section 6, we'll unlock the private bedroom etiquette of the samurai class, where warrior discipline met intimate ritual in ways you won't want to miss. You enter the sturdy timber gates of a samurai residence, just as dusk settles the bamboo lanterns casting quivering shadows across lacquered armor stands. Inside the polished floors, echo with the click of your sandals as you navigate toward the Oshia room, a small chamber reserved for private gatherings and, well, more private gatherings. For a samurai, discipline was paramount, yet even the most austere warrior needed guidance when navigating the battlefield of the boudoir mainstream historical fact. Stepping onto a plush zabuton cushion, you notice a low table set with rolled silk futons, a carved box of incense sticks, and a lacquered tray holding delicate porcelain cups of fragrant plum wine. The household's senior retainer, a grizzled veteran named Kagamori, clears his throat and begins the prelude to bedroom etiquette, his voice a low rumble that commands respect. He explains that before any intimacy, a samurai must purify his mind through a brief meditation, chanting the mantra, Fudo Myoo, guard my spirit, to ensure his actions align with honor, not merely desire. Historians still argue whether this practice was genuinely widespread, or more an idealized guideline recorded in etiquette manuals. Scholarly debate. A light joke pops into your mind. Modern mindfulness apps could learn a thing or two from samurai. Just focus, warrior. Now get back to texting your ex. But beneath the humor is a glimpse of sincerity. The ritual reminded warriors that intimacy, like combat, required intention and respect. After meditation, Kagamori presents a silk folding fan engraved with stylized cherry blossoms. He reveals that a samurai offered this fan as a silent invitation. Opening it slowly, closing it sharply, or tracing its ribs conveyed different messages. I admire your spirit. Shall we retire together? Or the subtle, my blade rests in your name. You carefully mimic the gestures under his watchful eye, feeling the weight of centuries of coded communication. Historians still argue whether these fan signals were standardized across clans or varied household to household. Another fringe tidbit. Some villagers whispered that samurai decorated the fan's inner ribs with a thin layer of musk extracted from civet cats, ensuring an alluring scent during each flick. Quirky tidbit. There's no archaeological residue to confirm this, but the idea lingers like an unspoken promise. A second light joke drifts in. If only online dating had fan signals, you'd know exactly when to swipe left. Yet you set aside modern cynicism and accept Kagamori's next instruction, the proper sequence of clothing removal. Each layer hakama trousers, kosode kimono. Undergarment robes must be removed with deliberate grace, folded neatly and placed in ascending order of honor. A botched sequence could insult one's partner, or worse, tarnish one's reputation. Imagine the Tinder screenshots swirling around clan gossip. Did you see how he tossed his kimono, and you shudder? As you practice, a young samurai named Ayakatsu enters bearing a shallow copper basin filled with warm water. He kneels and offers a soft linen cloth for cleansing. Even in private quarters, cleanliness was intertwined with ritual washing hands, and face symbolized washing away the day's blood and sorrow before embracing tenderness. Historians still argue whether this ablution was strictly ceremonial or simply practical hygiene adapted into a formal dance. You cup the warm water, feeling its soothing warmth flood your palms. A light joke surfaces. If only I could wipe away my mistakes as easily. Yet the gesture feels meaningful, like donning armor before battle. The samurai donned purity before intimacy. Ayakatsu then reveals a small lacquered box containing scented incense pouches, filled with bits of powdered sandalwood mugwort and safflower petals. These pouches, known as nyoko, were tucked beneath pillows or worn as sachets against the skin. Mainstream historical fact. The blend was believed to calm nerves, heighten sensitivity, and mask any unwanted odors. One quirky rumor claims some samurai spiced the mix with crushed wasp larvae for an extra tingle. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether that's an overblown anecdote or a genuine secret ingredient. You slide a pouch into your sash and inhale its layered aroma. The woody sweetness intermingles with a hint of bitterness, creating a sensory tension, much like the anticipation you feel. A third light joke flits by. This is one scented sachet I wouldn't mind losing. Missing warrior seeks knows. With each ritual step, you sense the samurai's dual demand to approach intimacy with strategic precision and heartfelt respect. The blade that defended the clan also symbolized self-control, and tonight, that same discipline guided your every movement. As you lower your gaze, you notice the futons arranged in subtle offset, one placed slightly lower, indicating which side the inviter would lie upon a silent cue to follow. Historians still argue whether this placement reflected rank personal preference or pure practicality. Kagemori finally bows, signaling that instruction is complete. You stand feeling oddly both exposed and empowered. The room's paper walls seem to breathe with possibility, as though the spirit of every samurai lover since time immemorial watches in silent endorsement. You step toward the futons, the scent of incense and sachet petals guiding each step. A soft hush falls, broken only by the distant chirp of night insects beyond the eaves. You lie down on the cool futon, remembering how each ritual element meditation fan signals purification. Scented sachets was less about ceremony and more about forging a sacred container for vulnerability. It was a battlefield of trust, where warrior hearts met in deliberate surrender. As you settle in, the lantern light dims, and the house settles into silence. You trace imaginary patterns on the futon's edge, thinking of how these practices bridge the gap between martial rigor and tender humanity. Next, in Section 7, we'll wander into the private homes of commoners to uncover the courtship customs of village Japan, where intimacy bloomed among everyday rhythms. You follow a narrow dirt path from the samurai enclave back toward the clustered thatched roofs of a peasant village. The scent of freshly baked mochi mingles with the earthy aroma of tilled fields. As dusk deepens, windows glow with paper lanterns revealing glimpses of families gathering for evening meals. Here among commoners, the dance of desire is less codified by court or creed, and more improvisational, where every gesture carried personal significance. Mainstream historical fact. Stepping into a modest dwelling, you find a young couple seated on straw mats beside a low hearth. The woman Keiko draws water from an iron kettle, while her partner Hiroshi sharpens a wooden pestle for pounding rice. They exchange shy glances, no fan signals or scented sachets, just a quick glance, a half smile. In many villages, informal moon viewing gatherings doubled as matchmaking events. Villagers brought simple rice cakes and tea, while eligible single adults exchanged polite compliments. Mainstream historical fact. You sit beside them, joining this rustic soiree. A light joke flutters. It's like speed dating if your date hands you mochi instead of a name card. The group laughs gently, smoke curling from the hearth as rice cakes roast. One fringe legend whispers that some villages held secret courting windows, where young pairs slipped through openings in interior partitions for whispered conversations. Historians still argue whether these architectural quirks were intentional or mere builder improvisation. Scholarly debate. Hiroshi offers you a roasted mochi, its surface crackling with charred sweetness. You bite in, feeling the chewy warmth, and sense how food itself played a role in intimacy. Another fringe tidbit claims that flirtatious villagers once dipped mochi in honeysuckle syrup to lend an aphrodisiac edge, Though lack of residue evidence leaves historians still arguing its authenticity, quirky tidbit. The cozy gathering shifts outdoors onto a wooden veranda overlooking rice paddies. Paper lanterns hang from beam ends, swaying in a gentle breeze. Keiko brings out a simple bamboo flute playing a soft melody that echoes across the fields. Music, like in Heian courts, became a conduit for unspoken emotion. A single note could carry longing across hushed crowds. You realize that even without formal Utah Aways competitions, villagers engaged in impromptu musical flirtation, mainstream historical fact. You notice Hiroshi smoothing his hair, a universal gesture of attraction. A second light joke dances through your mind. Even 200 years ago, guys worried about bad hair days. Keiko's friends giggle, nudging her as she plucks a few petals from a nearby plum branch and tucks them behind her ear, a silent sign of readiness to engage in courtship. Historians still argue whether floral gestures held standardized meanings or varied by village scholarly debate. As the music fades, a neighbor offers to demonstrate the hand-holding ritual known as taguri. Two participants clasp hands palm to palm and slide their fingers together, a simple but intimate act that signaled mutual interest without the fanfare of elite signals. You try it with a volunteer. The warmth of contact sends a private thrill through you, prompting a third light joke. Feels safer than trying to interpret fan etiquette. Yet beneath the jest, you feel the sincerity of connection in that gentle embrace. Back inside, the hearth has cooled and the couple prepares a late-night snack of millet porridge. Elders recount humorous anecdotes of matchmaking misadventures. One man once delivered a love letter sealed inside a dried persimmon, only to have it mistaken for a snack and eaten by his beloved's grandmother. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether this tale was true or a cautionary fodder for young suitors. The conversation turns to seasonal festivals, particularly Tanabata, when folk tied written wishes to bamboo branches under the summer stars. Single villagers inscribed hopes for love and fertility, then watched the papers flutter away. Mainstream accounts describe Tanabata as both a festival for star-crossed lovers and a communal celebration of wishes. Mainstream historical fact. One romantic fringe interpretation suggests that hidden within the wishes were coded proposals. Historians still argue whether such covert proposals occurred or were later romanticized. Scholarly debate. You step outside again as fireflies rise from the fields. You and a young local Aiko weave a small bamboo wreath decorated with rice stalks and paper strips. Placing it atop your head, you feel like part of the land itself, rooted, protected, and poised for union. This simple rite, though fleeting, forged a bond between person, place, and possibility. A fourth light joke surfaces. Forget roses, bamboo wreaths are the next big thing in wearable romance. Aiko hums an old love song as she guides you along the path back to the village gate. The night air is thick with cicada calls, and each step resonates with the collective heartbeat of communal longing. You pause under a torii, marking the hamlet's boundary, and exchange bows, an elegant closure to an evening of shared intimacy. Walking away, you reflect on how common a courtship thrived on resourcefulness and genuine warmth unbound by rigid etiquette or lofty poetry. Beneath thatched eaves and across open fields, villagers found myriad ways to kindle desire through food songs, simple gestures, and the earth itself. Next, in Section 8, we'll stroll into the licensed pleasure quarters to uncover the world of courtesans' tea houses and the red light intrigue that defined Edo's entertainment districts. You slip through the vermilion torii, marking the entrance to the licensed pleasure quarter, a warren of narrow alleys lined with glowing paper lanterns, lacquered gates, and wooden tea houses. In Edo, early 17th, mid-19th centuries, these yukaku districts were officially sanctioned zones for courtesans, entertainers, and pleasure seekers. Mainstream historical fact. The air thrums with shamisen strings and the murmur of kimono silk brushing against polished wood. As you enter a high-ceilinged okiya, you're greeted by the rustle of layered kimono and the soft laughter of debutantes in training. These women oiran wore towering hairpieces, lavish obi sashes, and painted faces that shimmered under lantern light. Their role extended beyond sex. They were accomplished poets, dancers and musicians mastering arts, meant to enchant both ear and heart. A light joke drifts through your mind. Swipe right, if you can recite the tale of Genji. Yet here conversation flowed like brewed tea, measured, refined, impossible to rush. Behind you, brocade curtains conceal rooms where clients reclined on tatami alongside courtesans. The exchange began with a ritual pour of scented sake from a lacquer ewer, an invitation to ease into intimacy. Mainstream records note that Oiran classes were stratified. Senior courtesans commanded higher fees and taught junior girls the nuances of flirtation. Mainstream historical fact. You watch as a geisha in training pours a small cup, her fingers trembling in practiced precision. Historians still argue whether this division between Oiran and later geisha blurred over time or remained rigid until the Meiji era. In a quieter tea house next door, you find a group of lower-class hostesses, Yako Meshimai, serving humble rice gruel with bitter greens. Their clientele comprised artisans and merchants seeking respite from the rigid hierarchy of Edo society. One fringe tidbit suggests that these hostesses colored their gruel with saffron to feign exotic luxury, though skeptics argue saffron's rarity made this improbable, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such embellishments were widespread or mere gossip. A second light joke surfaces. Nothing says self-care like overpriced gruel, and gossip sounds like my last brunch. Yet beneath the jest lies appreciation for how pleasure quarters catered to diverse tastes, weaving social and sexual services into public life. You stroll past red-painted gates with carved phoenixes, feeling the electric buzz of possibility. Peering into a narrow alley, you glimpse a whisper-thin scroll hung outside a discreet tea house. Calligraphy reads, "Evening of Blossoms and Whispers." Patrons entered through a low threshold, removing sandals to reveal socked feet. Whispered names guided them through shadowed corridors to private chambers, adorned with silk screens painted with peonies, symbols of fleeting beauty and desire. Here, courtesans performed the art of koshi, teasing conversation, playful banter, and measured glances that stoked anticipation. Mainstream historical fact. One quirky story tells of a courtesan who hid love poems in folded origami cranes, delivering each verse on taloned metal clips. Historians still argue whether these lethal-looking clips doubled as subtle threats or simply ornate stationary scholarly debate. A third light joke emerges. Imagine getting a poem stuck to your kimono, romantic until you can't sit down. You pause before a no performance staged in a corner pavilion. Masked actors embody ancient spirits, their rhythmic chanting, evoking otherworldly longing. Mainstream accounts place theatre as part of pleasure district evenings, blending high art with carnal pleasure. Mainstream historical fact. One fringe interpretation posits that courtesans and actors collaborated on secret plays with erotic undercurrents. Historians still argue whether any scripts survived such subversive works. As the shamisen melody fades, you follow soft footsteps along a lantern-lit corridor into a private koi pond garden. Here, couples whispered promises beneath weeping willow boughs, the water reflecting flickering lights like fractured moonbeams. You inhale the scent of night-blooming jasmine, a fragrance prized for its supposed aphrodisiac properties. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether jasmine was imported expressly for pleasure quarters or grown locally in hidden plots. A fourth light joke flits by. If only modern bars served jasmine cocktails would make my date nights smell amazing. Yet those fragrances anchored experience, binding memory to scent in ways as potent then as now. You linger by the pond's edge, cupping water in your hands to cool flushed cheeks. Less a practical gesture, more a silent homage to ritual purification before surrendering to passion. Finally, as dawn's first light softens lantern glow, you step back through the gates. The red lacquer seems muted in morning haze, the streets empty of revelers, but still heavy with whispered echoes of lovers' footsteps. You realize that Edo's pleasure quarters wove art performance and intimacy into a tapestry that blurred lines between public spectacle and private desire. Next, in Section 9, we'll meet families negotiating arranged marriages and discover the charms, pressures, and surprising agency of women within those unions. You glide into a timbered reception hall of a merchant's household, the scent of polished cedar mingling with fresh citrus, from a small table of seasonal fruit. At the far end, Patriarch Nakajima-san and his wife Miho preside over a discreet gathering, a yoriai, or formal match meeting, where prospective in-laws negotiate the future of their children's union. Mainstream historical fact. You slip onto a cushion beside the wall heart, fluttering at the hush of adult voices trading polite assurances. Across the low table sits Lady Sato, her silk kimono patterned with crane symbols of longevity, folded precisely around her. Her daughter Kaori waits behind her mother's ample sleeve eyes, downcast. Kaori's prospects hinge on a dowry negotiated today, strings of polished jade beads, silk bolts dyed in indigo, and a rare set of lacquered lacquer boxes inlaid with mother of pearl. You imagine haggling over heirlooms at an auction, only here the currency is honor, and the stakes extend through generations. A light joke drifts. Think of it as the world's longest-running real estate transaction, only the property in question has feelings. Yet beneath the jest lies the gravity of family alliances' status and survival. In medieval and early modern Japan, arranged marriages cemented trade ties, political alliances, and social stability. Historians still argue whether children possessed real agency in these negotiations, or were mere pawns in a dynastic chess game. Scholarly debate. The matchmaker, an elderly woman named Okubo-san, unfolds a parchment scroll listing both families' credentials, lineage landholdings, and even plum orchard yields. She reads each entry in a melodic cadence, then pauses to allow the other family to respond. Your pulse quickens as she reaches the section on personal virtues, diligent, amiable, or artistic. She notes Kaori's calligraphy skills and Miho's reputation for deft household management. These soft attributes often tip the balance, proving that a bride's temperament mattered nearly as much as her trousseau. Mainstream historical fact. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some dowries included small wooden charms shaped like sparrows believed to carry the bride's prayers for swift childbirth, though lack of surviving examples leaves historians still arguing their prevalence. Quirky tidbit. You catch Lady Sato's fingers absently tracing the sparrow motif embroidered on her obi, as though seeking comfort in the notion of unseen protection. As negotiations proceed, you sense Kaori's tension. She adjusts her sleeve, revealing a hidden charm bracelet beneath 7 carved beads made from cherry pits, each inscribed with a secret wish. Framed as a personal memento, these bracelets allowed brides to express private hopes for happiness, understanding, or even a stormy youthful romance. Historians still argue whether such clandestine tokens were common or confined to poetically inclined families. Scholarly debate. A second light joke surfaces. If only modern couples got to sneak in heartfelt notes alongside prenups, loan agreements would be so much more romantic. The patriarchs exchange measured words concerning inheritance rights and tea ceremony responsibilities, emphasizing that marriage served both emotional and economic functions. You realize that love, although not the primary driver, found its place in tidy notes, slipped between pages of family ledgers. Small lacquer bowls of sweet rice porridge appear, signaling a break. Sipping the warm nourishment, you note how communal eating forged rapport. Sharing food softened the formal atmosphere. One fringe rumor claims that some families laced the porridge with calming herbs to ease anxieties. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine practice or later hearsay. Quirky tidbit. You chuckle inwardly, but feel sympathy for Kaori, whose future rests on every bite. As murmur fades, Okubo-san gestures to Miho, prompting her to present the dowry items. Each cloth bolt is unrolled with ceremony, each jade bead laid out on black lacquered cloth. You imagine an audience at a theatre unveiling props, yet each item here carries real weight. Historians still argue whether dowries ever exceeded a family's means, leading to secret debts or clandestine loans. Scholarly debate. The final exchange involves written vows. Lady Sato produces a small scroll of Kaori's own making, adorned with a brief poem pledging duty and affection to her future husband. This gesture of personal expression, though framed within obligation, offered a rare moment of voice for the bride. A third light joke drifts. Imagine drafting your wedding vows during a business merger meeting. Yet the sincerity of Kaori's words shimmers in the dim light. One whispered anecdote describes brides who secretly tore out a line. May our children be many to defy societal expectations of relentless motherhood, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such small rebellions were acts of empowerment or simply literary flourishes. You wish you could glimpse Kaori's expression when she penned that omission. As the Yorei concludes, the families bow deeply and exchange final words of mutual respect. A sense of solemn relief fills the room, an alliance forged, futures entwined. Kaori stands her posture graceful yet resolute, stepping away with familial blessing into a life scripted by ancient custom, yet open to personal negotiation. You exit into the cool evening lanterns lighting your path. Your mind hums with the duality of arranged marriage in ancient Japan, structured agreements that nonetheless accommodated private yearnings and individual personality. You ponder how love can flourish even within contracts growing between the lines of duty and desire. Next, in Section 10, we'll unfold the vivid world of Shunga erotic art, where woodblock prints brought hidden passions into public view. You walk into a dimly lit tea house adorned with sliding screens painted in autumn foliage, the scent of burning incense curling through the air. On a low table before you lies a selection of Shunga prints, erotic woodblock art produced during the Edo period, prized by samurai merchants and artists alike, mainstream historical fact. The prints depict lovers in various embraces, rendered in vivid color and bold lines, each composition both candid and stylized. Reaching out, you touch the textured paper, feeling the slight ridges where ink pooled in the woodblock's carved channels. One striking print shows a pair entwined on a lacquered futon, their expressions simultaneously serene and rapturous. A quirky fringe interpretation suggests that some prints hid secret recipes for aphrodisiac oils within their margins, encoded as botanical sketches, though historians still argue whether any genuine recipes survived, or this is later fan theory scholarly debate. A light joke drifts through your mind, guaranteed to bring new meaning to reading between the lines. Nearby, a gentleman in a plain kimono whispers that Shunga served not only sexual titillation, but also as guides to proper technique, early how-to manuals, if you will, mainstream historical fact. You imagine if modern dating apps offered tutorial printouts, swipe here, grind there. Another whimsical anecdote claims that some Shunga prints were secretly gifted in wedding dowries, meant to instruct young couples in the art of intimacy. Historians still argue whether these were sincere educational tools or simply risque collectibles, scholarly debate. A second light joke flits by. Imagine your grandma finding an instructional scroll in her bridal chest. Awkward family dinner conversation guaranteed. You turn a page to find a playful composition featuring an octopus and a courtesan, an allusion to an infamous legend of tentacles of the sea. While that tale is more myth than fact, it illustrates the period's playful, boundary-pushing approach to erotic imagery, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such aquatic fantasies ever had a deeper symbolic meaning, or were pure shock value. A third light joke bubbles in your mind. If only modern art had such straightforward captions, when sushi just isn't enough. Yet beneath the humor lies appreciation for the artistry. Delicate cherry blossom petals hover against vibrant textiles, and every glance, touch and sigh is immortalized with precise line work. You notice that Shunga artists were often among the same masters who produced benign ukiyo-e scenes of landscapes, kabuki actors and courtesans. Hokusai and Utamaro, for example, created both celebrated prints of Mount Fuji and clandestine Shunga editions circulated among select circles, mainstream historical fact. The dual roles of these artists speak to the era's complex relationship with sexuality, revered in private, censored in public. One rumor posits that some Shunga prints bore invisible watermarks that would appear under heated steam, revealing hidden verses of erotic poetry, quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether any prints with such effects have ever been authenticated. You can't help but grin at the notion of literally steamy secrets. Beyond the erotic visuals, Shunga prints also carried moral messages. Subtle background symbols, such as wilting flowers, hinted at the transience of pleasure, reminding viewers of impermanence in true Buddhist fashion, mainstream historical fact. Some scholars contend these motifs served as cautionary devices, while others argue they were simply aesthetic flourishes. Historians still argue about the artist's true intent. Scholarly debate. You lean back against the tatami, contemplating how these prints functioned as private windows into human desire shared among friends or hidden beneath obi sashes for discreet viewing. The knowledge that these images were both celebrated and condemned adds a thrilling edge, like watching a drama you're not supposed to see. As you stand to leave, you fold the prints carefully, feeling the slight resistance of layered paper. The courtyard beyond is bathed in moonlight, and you pause to savor the contrast shadow and ink concealment and revelation art and appetite. Next, in section 11, we'll explore same-sex relationships among aristocratic circles and uncover surprising tales of love beyond gender boundaries. You slip into a candlelit tea house nestled within a noble estate, drawn by the soft strains of biwa, echoing through sliding screens. Here, in the refined circles of aristocrats, same-sex bonds, wakashudo for men and onado for women, were recognized as meaningful relationships that transcended conventional marriage. Mainstream historical fact. The warm glow of bronze lanterns casts dancing patterns on silk kimonos as you take your place beside two court youths engaged in hushed conversation. A light joke drifts in. If only modern workplaces acknowledged office crushes with formal etiquette manuals. The pair exchange slender wooden tokens carved with their family crests, gifted in private ceremonies marking their union. Historians still argue whether these tokens functioned as genuine commitment symbols or were largely theatrical gestures meant to reinforce loyalty among followers. Scholarly debate. You lean forward, noticing the delicate brushwork on one token, a pair of entwined wisteria vines. Tradition held that those who shared the same flower understood each other's souls. A quirky tidbit suggests that some lovers dipped these tokens in scented oils, rosehip or jasmine, so that their fragrance lingered long after the meeting ended. Quirky tidbit. Though there's no residue left on surviving artifacts, it's an intoxicating thought. Soft laughter ripples as one youth uncovers a scroll of waka poems dedicated to his beloved. These verses, rich in seasonal imagery and coded declarations of affection, were a cornerstone of same-sex aristocratic courting. Mainstream historical fact. You imagine exchanging DMs in 12th century style. Your moonlit analogy moves me. The youth reads aloud a line. Your reflection in the silver bowl eclipses the moon's pale glow. Flame flickers against his flushed cheeks. A second light joke surfaces. I can't even get a good Tinder pickup line, let alone compose moon metaphors. Outside, the koi pond's surface shimmers with lantern light, reminding you how water motifs signified emotional depth and fluidity, especially poignant in relationships both revered and discreet. Historians still argue whether these same-sex bonds were considered romantic love in our modern sense, or framed more as mentorships with emotional intimacy. Scholarly debate. As the evening deepens, a poised woman in layered junihito enters, bowing to one of the male pair. You realize onado wasn't merely a male domain. Women of the court also formed enduring same-sex friendships that sometimes crossed into erotic territory. Mainstream historical fact. A quirky anecdote tells of female attendants exchanging silk ribbons embroidered with secret love messages, only to use them later as bookmarks in their favorite diaries. Historians still argue whether those diaries concealed confessions or simply floral poetry. Scholarly debate. You take a quiet sip of rose-infused tea offered by a nearby attendant. Its subtle sweetness warms you, and you can't help a third light joke. I'd pay top dollar for a love emulator tea. One sip, and my DMs would flood. Yet the layering of ritual in these bonds feels profoundly human. Tokens, poetry-scented teas, all tender threads weaving connections beyond normative roles. The two young men rise and step onto a balcony overlooking manicured gardens. One offers his cloak to his companion against the night breeze, a gesture of protection and regard. Mainstream historical fact. You shiver in admiration at the intimacy of that simple act. Historians still argue whether such public displays among same-sex pairs signaled social acceptance or quietly tested the limits of decorum. Scholarly debate. In the garden, fireflies hover above a moss-covered stone basin. The youths reach for a pair of matching wooden ladles, performing a purification ritual borrowed from shrine practices lapping water in synchronized motions before pressing hands together in solidarity and affection. A quirky tidbit suggests some participants added droplets of perfumed oil to the basin, turning purification into a sensorial promise. Quirky tidbit. No documentation survives, but it makes the heart flutter. A fourth light joke pops up. If only modern couples did synchronized hand-washing before every date to talk about building trust. Yet beneath that humor is a poignant truth. These aristocratic relationships blended ritual with genuine care, offering safe spaces for emotional expression within a rigid social hierarchy. You watch as the pair recline on a low bench, drawing a sleeve between them to share whispered confidences. The screen behind them bears a painted phoenix symbol of rebirth and transformation, underscoring how love itself could reshape identity. They trace its feathers with slender fingers, a silent vow of renewal. Historians still argue whether such symbolic interactions conveyed deeper spiritual meanings or were purely aesthetic flourishes. Scholarly debate. As you prepare to leave, one of the youths presses a folded slip of paper into your hand, a name poem crafted in his lover's honor, 5 lines of beauty and devotion. You tuck it into your kimono sleeve, carrying it like a secret treasure. The tea house door closes behind you with a soft click. Stepping into the moonlit courtyard, you feel the echo of hearts beating in harmonious defiance of social strictures. These aristocratic bonds, male and female, remind you that love in ancient Japan was never one size fits all, but a tapestry of rituals, gestures, and coded messages. Next, in section 12, we'll delve into fertility folklore and the charms that people use to coax conception, from talismans to totems and everything in between. You wander into a twilight market by a stone torii, lanterns bobbing above stalls where merchants hawk talismans and charms. In ancient Japan, fertility was central enough that both rural villagers and courtly elites sought supernatural aid to conceive, invoking divine favor through crafted objects imbued with symbolic power. Mainstream historical fact. Each stall overflows with trinkets promising conception, carved wooden phalluses, embroidered silk pouches, and tiny clay figurines modeled after the dog you encountered back in Joman pits. A middle-aged vendor beckons you closer, his stall draped in red cloth. He presents a slender wooden amulet, an inochi-gushi life twig shaped like a budding branch. He explains that couples carried these talismans on their person, or placed them beneath their mattress to nurture the seed of life. Mainstream historical fact. You hold the smooth wood and feel the artisan's careful carving. Delicate knots along the shaft represent each hoped-for child, while the tip tapers like a promise. A light joke drifts into your mind. If only modern fertility apps were as straightforward. Carry this stick and boom. But you smile at the earnest simplicity of the ritual. The vendor winks and reveals a fringe variation. Some craftsmen carved hidden notches on the reverse side that only the couple would know about, turning the amulet into a private pact. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether these secret notches were a widespread practice or merely a later romantic embellishment. Scholarly debate. Next to the inochi-gushi hang rows of silk pouches strung with colorful beads and stitched with auspicious kanji. These kazaradama pouches contain tiny charm seeds of ginkgo for longevity, safflower petals for passion, and crushed coral for resilience. A young woman browsing alongside you murmurs that the pouches were often charged under a full moon by shrine maidens performing kagura dances, imbuing them with lunar energy believed to regulate women's cycles. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether moonlit charging rituals were genuinely invoked or are poetic retellings from later sources. Scholarly debate. You pocket a small crimson pouch, feeling the heft of its contents. Peppercorns for virility, powdered deer antler for strength, and a scrap of red silk said to draw love's fire. A second light joke surfaces. This is the spiciest love potion I've ever carried. Hope my heart can handle the heat. Nearby, an elderly customer picks up a phallic-shaped candle carved from beeswax. The vendor gestures flamboyantly as he describes how burning the candle together symbolized 2 flames merging into one, an intimate ritual still practiced at some shrines during spring festivals. Mainstream historical fact. You glance upward as soft drums signal the evening's fertility ritual at the larger shrine across the square. Couples gather before a stone pedestal, engraved with a satyr-like figure, offering their talismans in exchange for priestly blessings. Mainstream records note that priests chanted invocations to the kami deities of childbirth, like Izanami and Koyane, calling on them to open the gates of life, mainstream historical fact. One fringe rumor suggests that priests sometimes added secret incantations borrowed from Chinese Taoist texts to the standard chants, though historians still argue whether such cross-cultural borrowings occurred or are later myth-making scholarly debate. A third light joke drifts through your mind. Priests exchanging vows with Taoist flair. May your baby be as calm as a Zen master, and you laugh softly to yourself. As night falls, you follow torchlight up stone steps to the shrine's inner sanctum. Lantern glow reveals painted Ima plaques lining the walls, small wooden boards where worshippers painted images of cranes, rabbits, and auspicious plants alongside earnest pleas. Grant us a healthy son, bless our womb. Mainstream accounts describe Iema offerings as a tangible link between supplicant and divine, their prayers literally left behind at sacred sites. Mainstream historical fact. You take a moment to read one faded Iema, a hand-drawn peach symbol of immortality, scrawled beneath the simple line, "Let our child laugh and live long." It strikes you how universal the sentiment feels, invested in hope, fear, and the longing for life's continuity. A woman beside you taps the Iema board and whispers, "Legends say peaches repelled evil spirits from newborns." A fringe tidbit that adds both warmth and a shiver. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the peach symbolism originated from Chinese law or emerged indigenously in Shinto practice. Scholarly debate. Below the Iema board, a basin of still water reflects the lanterns overhead. Couples ladle water with small cups, sprinkling droplets onto their talismans before leaving them behind a symbolic cleansing and dedication. You join in, feeling each cool bead of water against your palms, as if the shrine itself acknowledges your whispered wish. You murmur your own hope into the breeze. May this path lead to a new life, and place your crimson pouch among the others. A final light joke surfaces. If only online wishboards worked this well, double tap for divine favor. The shrine's stone steps creak under departing footsteps as the ceremony ends. You step back into the market square, senses alive with incense smoke, wooden talismans, and hushed prayers. You realize that fertility in ancient Japan was not left to chance or confined to private chambers. It was woven into public rituals, communal markets, and sacred spaces where objects bridged mortal longing and divine possibility. Whether through carved sticks, silk pouches, or moonlit dances, people mobilized hope and belief to coax life from land and womb alike. Next, in Section 13, we'll spotlight the most scandalous fringe practices, taboo rites, and whispered controversies that push the boundaries of social acceptability. You slip into a moonlit clearing at the edge of a bamboo grove, where villagers whisper of hidden rites performed only once a generation. Here, beyond sanctioned ceremonies, scandalous fringe practices teetered on the edge of taboo rituals, so secret that participants swore oaths of silence beneath sacred oaths. Mainstream historical fact. The scent of burning mugwort hangs heavy, and your pulse quickens as you draw closer. A narrow altar carved from a single cedar log stands at the grove's heart, adorned with bowls of rice wine animal bones, and a single blood-red mushroom, rumored to be Amanita muscaria, an otherworldly fungus said to heighten sensation and dissolve inhibitions. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether ancient Japanese ever consumed Amanita muscaria intentionally, or whether such associations are modern misinterpretations of shamanic practice. Scholarly debate. You observe hooded figures, their faces hidden by woven reed masks, encircling the altar in hushed chant. The leader, a woman known as the Forest Oracle, intones an invocation to Okuninushi, the kami of love and medicine. Open the body's gate, reveal the soul's flame. Mainstream documents attest to Okuninushi's association with matchmaking and healing, often celebrated during Izumo's grand festivals. Mainstream historical fact. A light joke flickers. I'd RSVP to that festival, just for the healing powers, obviously. One participant steps forward, offering a slender reed ring inazo, woven into a closed loop as a symbol of unity. Legend claims that couples who exchanged these rings in the grove bound their souls for 7 lifetimes. Quirky tidbit. Yet scholars still argue whether these bands existed or emerged later as folkloric embellishments. Scholarly debate. As the chant intensifies, some figures begin a slow swaying dance, their robes brushing against illuminated screens set around the perimeter. One fringe account suggests that observers intoxicated by moonlight and rice wine slipped beyond ritual boundaries into unrestrained coupling. Beneath the bamboo's watchful gaze, an orgiastic climax meant to merge humanity with nature. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether such erotic excess occurred or whether these tales were moral warnings conjured by orthodox priests. A second light joke drifts. Sounds like Mother Nature's most exclusive after-party BYOB, bring your own bamboo. You edge closer, heart pounding, but respect the circle's perimeter, feeling the charged energy of those hidden acts. The oracle sprinkles powdered rice and saffron petals into the wine, stirring with a carved bone spoon. You imagine the brew's taste sweet, spicy, and tinged with mystery. One participant, his voice trembling, recounts a legend of a lover's bath hidden in the forest, a natural hot spring where the waters were believed to carry aphrodisiac minerals that bound couples together forever. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether any springs had such reputations, or if the lore simply romanticized local geothermic sites. Scholarly debate. A third light joke surfaces. If only modern spas offered eternal love memberships, I'd sign up in a heartbeat. The ceremony reaches its peak as the oracle uncovers a shallow wooden basin filled with water. Each couple steps forward, plunging hands into the basin to draw up droplets that they sprinkle over each other's heads, symbolizing mutual blessing and surrender. The air thrums with whispers of awe and ecstasy. You stand at the circle's edge, feeling the tension between reverence and desire, scandal and spirituality. This isn't folklore processed for tourist kits. It's a raw reminder that human yearning can erupt in hidden places, challenging the boundaries of community and belief. As the ritual winds down, figures disperse silently into the bamboo shadows, leaving behind only footprints and the faint scent of mugwort. You kneel to inspect the altar, brushing aside a shard of red mushroom cap. A chill runs through you. Was it real, or a vivid projection of collective longing? Historians still argue whether Amanita's role was literal or metaphorical, a symbol for forbidden passions rather than a psychoactive catalyst. A fourth light joke flutters. If only we had group chat logs from this, it'd make for sensational reading. You rise, stepping carefully over woven inazo rings left on the forest floor like silent witnesses. Moonlight filters through swaying bamboo, illuminating paths leading back to the mundane world. As you emerge from the grove, the hush of nocturnal insects greets you, and the ritual's echoes fade into the night air. You carry with you the knowledge that beneath formal rites and public customs, there lurked a hidden tapestry of taboo, where desire met daring in the moon's quiet glow. Next in Section 14, we'll trace how Tokugawa rule reshaped these sexual landscapes, ushering in new norms and enduring legacies. You step through the heavy wooden gates of Edo Castle's outer bailey, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the stone pathways. Under Tokugawa rule, 1603-1868, Japan entered a period of unprecedented stability and isolation, a backdrop that profoundly reshaped sexual customs and intimate behaviors, mainstream historical fact. The strict social order demanded that public morality mirror governmental control, yet private desires found new avenues to flourish beneath the veneer of conformity. As you wander into a flower-dusted alley behind the castle walls, you pass discreet signboards advertising evening conversation gatherings, coded salons where samurai merchants and artisans met to exchange poetry, gossip, and occasionally discreet flirtations. A light joke edges into your mind Edo's version of speed dating, complete with mandatory haiku icebreakers. These salons exemplified the era's tension between rigid hierarchy and burgeoning urban culture, merging Edo's emerging pleasure quarters with genteel intellectual exchange. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were tolerated by authorities as harmless cultural pursuits or quietly monitored for subversive content. Scholarly debate. Turning a corner, You enter a narrow tea house lined with rows of lacquered boxes labeled secret editions. Inside, a bookseller in muted robes offers rare copies of kabuki scripts, annotated with erotic subtexts, scripts whispered to have fueled clandestine readings among literati. One quirky tidbit suggests that these secret editions bore hidden glyphs in the margins, indicating recommended female roles to focus on an early form of editorial guidance for romantic escapades. Quirky tidbit. Scholars still argue whether such marginalia were widespread or localized to specific publishing houses. You take a seat at a woven reed mat as the bookseller offers you a slip of scented paper inked with clandestine poetic couplets meant to spark nocturnal longing. Taking a cautious sniff, you catch hints of plum and sandalwood. A second light joke surfaces. If only Tinder bios came with custom scents, prose, witty, aromatic. Even as you smile, you sense the underlying seriousness printed matter no longer only entertained. It codified desire in ink and fragrance. Exiting the tea house, you traverse a bustling city district where lacquered palanquins ferry geisha and entertainers to private okiya parties. Geisha culture evolved distinctly from the earlier oiran system, less hierarchical, more accessible to emerging merchant classes, and central to Edo's nightlife mainstream historical fact. You glimpse geisha in muted kimono patterns, dancing beneath gaslit lanterns, their performances blending song dance and conversation to cultivate refined intimacy. Historians still argue whether geisha's rise diluted or democratized the art of courtship. Scholarly debate. A third light joke drifts by. Geisha speedruns master 3 tea ceremony steps in under a minute. You follow one geisha into a side chamber where she offers you a delicate ceramic cup of green tea. As you sip its bitterness, she places a thin paper fan before you inscribed with a teasing message, an invitation to meet again. You realize that in Edo, such tokens held the weight of social currency, affirming connections in a world of strict class boundaries. Continuing, you pass a storefront displaying shunga prints now openly sold under relaxed censorship laws that forbade depicting the shogun's family, but tolerated erotic art mainstream historical fact. One print catches your eye, a delicate scene of lacquered twins entwined under a cherry blossom tree. A fringe rumor claims certain publishers included microdots of kanji, instructing readers on bedroom positions. Historians still argue whether any such microprint techniques existed or are later embellishments. Scholarly debate. You chuckle inwardly. Talk about reading between the lines. Night falls, and you wander into a quiet neighborhood where newly constructed machiya townhouses hide secret flower streets down narrow back alleys. These lanes, accessible only through unmarked doors, led to tiny establishments where scholars recited love poems under candlelight and friendly wells served infused sake. Quirky tidbit. Patrons whispered that well water drawn from deep clay layers carried minerals believed to heighten passion. Historians still argue whether these waters had true aphrodisiac properties or whether the legend blossomed from clever marketing. A fourth light joke surfaces. If only modern dating profiles touted local well water sources, dehydrated come for the H2O and stay for the wink. You step into one such establishment greeted by a lacquered sign reading, "Whispers and Petals." Inside, a hostess leads you to a low table strewn with cherry blossom petals, an homage to fleeting beauty and ephemeral desire. A brass incense burner sends spirals of jasmine-scented smoke upward, and you feel the charged atmosphere settle around you. The hostess slips a folded poem into your hand, an anonymous offering from a previous patron. It reads, "Your laughter drips like dew on morning blooms." Even without attributing a name, the verse feels deeply personal. Mainstream records note that anonymous affection notes called Furusato Gaki circulated widely in Edo, allowing admirers to express longing without public embarrassment. Mainstream historical fact. Yet some tales claim certain notes concealed veiled threats. Historians still argue whether any contained code words for bribery or protection rackets. Scholarly debate. As the evening winds down, you exit into the lantern-lit street, the muffled echo of shamisen strings fading behind you. Tokugawa's legacy emerges in the city's architecture, print culture, and social customs, a world where public order coexisted with private pleasure. and where intimacy found expression in poetry performance and price-controlled courtesan districts. Passing under a stone torii, leading to a shrine dedicated to Inari, the fox deity of fertility and prosperity, you pause to cast a final glance at the sprawling cityscape. Edo's transformation under the shogunate shows how governance and culture interlace to shape sexual norms, promoting stability while nurturing discrete subcultures of desire. Next, in section 15, we'll sketch the transition into early modern Japan's bedroom boundaries, exploring innovations, global influences, and the enduring legacies that set the stage for the Meiji era and beyond. You step through the threshold of an ornate Meiji-era townhouse as gas lamps give way to the soft glow of kerosene lanterns, and immediately sense a world in flux. Japan's forced opening to Western influence after 1853 ushered in new bedroom boundaries, corseted silhouettes, imported lace, and Victorian whispers mingling with bamboo screens, mainstream historical fact. In urban quarters, whispers of corsets and petticoats fluttered like forbidden haori sleeves, promising both constraint and curiosity. Walking down a polished hallway lined with sliding newspapers, now featuring serialized romance stories, you notice a lacquered writing desk where lovers penned letters on imported stationery scented with rosewater. One quirky tidbit tells of a Tokyo geisha secretly ordering frankincense from London via Dutch traders, then hiding the resin in hollowed pipe stems to perfume her chambers. Quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether these aromatic smuggling operations occurred widely or remain colorful embellishments in geisha memoirs. Scholarly debate. You follow the scent of sandalwood seeping from beneath a low table to a young couple practicing Western-style courtship rituals, holding hands before dinner, exchanging cheek kisses, and sharing cigars in porcelain ashtrays. The man wears a tailored frock coat, the woman an ankle-length bustle dress, an emblem of Meiji modernization and desire's new attire. Modern etiquette manuals, newly translated from English, advise gentlemen on the proper way to ask for a kiss. Press your lips lightly with a bent wrist, and maintain steady eye contact instructions, once unimaginable in a Heian court mainstream historical fact. A light joke drifts through your mind. Imagine a samurai fan signal app now with Victorian filter. Yet beneath the chuckle, the cultural collision was real public morality laws, borrowed from European models, outlawed public displays of affection, prompting couples to invent discreet signals. Tucking a handkerchief into a left sleeve meant I await you, while a silk flower in the right ear signified, meet me by the riverbank at dusk. Historians still argue whether these signals standardized across cities or varied by neighborhood. Scholarly debate. You wander into a teak-paneled drawing room where a lecturer demonstrates a German-imported modern bed, an iron-frame contraption with adjustable height and detachable footboard. One fringe anecdote claims that a well-connected Tokyo noblewoman hosted secret soirees in her Western bedroom, draping her bedposts with Turkish tobacco leaves to mask the scent of passion. Quirky tidbit. No surviving invitations confirm the gatherings, leaving scholars to debate whether these tales hint at aristocratic thrill-seeking or simply serve as moralistic gossip. Scholarly debate. A second light joke surfaces. If only modern furniture came with a bedtime mode, automatic nightcaps included. Despite the humor, the bed itself symbolized Japan's shifting intimacy. Mattresses replaced futons, and couples experimented with draped linens and nocturnal novels. Romance magazines began printing illustrations of ideal bedrooms, complete with chiffon canopies and fringed rugs, images far removed from the tatami mats, where samurai once mastered fan signals. You descend a narrow stairwell to a hidden alcove, where a small printing press churns out leaflets titled Secrets of Love's Embrace, an early sex manual translated from a French original. These pamphlets, sold clandestinely at bookstalls in Ginza, described positions, aphrodisiac recipes, and exercises for strengthening vital energy. One quirky detail alleges that some editions included woodcut diagrams, printed upside-down. Historians still argue whether this was a clandestine sign to identify unauthorized reprints or a simple typesetting error. Scholarly debate. A third light joke flits by, upside-down sex instructions guaranteed to keep you on your toes. You tuck a pamphlet into your coat as proof of this new era's daring curiosity. Outside tram lines glint in the lamplight, carrying lovers to parks where they strolled under cherry blossoms, a practice encouraged by municipal beautification efforts that framed public romance as a symbol of modern civility, mainstream historical fact. As you wander beneath Western-style street lamps, you pause before a storefront window, displaying exotic lingerie silken undergarments, embroidered with chrysanthemums, imported via Kobe port. Tales circulated of daring Tokyo matrons, commissioning custom corsets from European tailors, then wearing them beneath kimono for secret thrills. Historians still argue whether this Mediterranean lingerie craze was a fleeting fad among elites, or signaled a deeper shift in women's autonomy over their bodies. Scholarly debate. You return to the foyer of the townhouse, where a gramophone crackles with a foreign love song, its melody drifting through rice paper walls. You realize that early modern Japan's sexual landscape was neither wholly Western nor purely traditional, but an eclectic tapestry woven from global threads and native fibers. Each adaptation, be it the modern bed, the corset, or the clandestine pamphlet, reflected a society negotiating new definitions of privacy, pleasure, and partnership. A fourth light joke dances in your mind. Next time someone says, bedtime reading, I'll hand them a page from a Victorian sex manual. Yet even that joke underscores how intimately culture, technology, and desire entwined during Meiji Japan's metamorphosis. As you step back into the soft glow of kerosene lamps lining the street, you sense the anticipation of futures yet unwritten, where Japan's bedroom boundaries continue to evolve through Taisho and Showa eras, laying groundwork for today's conversations about intimacy, consent, and personal expression. Now, as the lantern's glow softens and the bustle of trams and printing presses recedes into the night, let the pace slow and the sounds dim. Imagine your breath aligning with the gentle rhythm of a Heian court poem, each exhale a verse drifting across time. Feel the warmth of a plum wine cup in your palm, its sweetness lingering like a tender memory. Recall the hushed perfume of jasmine in the pleasure quarters, the whispered fan signals of samurai, and the rosewater notes of Meiji stationery. Here in the cocoon of darkness, your curiosity rests. The dog's clay contours the cornstalk tokens, the embroidered alleys of Edo, and the lace-trimmed corsets of Meiji all fade into a serene mosaic of human longing. The past's vibrant rituals and hidden taboos become soft echoes embraced by the hush of night. Let go of the urgency to understand every symbol or decode each gesture. Allow the stories to settle like petals on still water. You are held in a timeless moment where the boundaries between eras blur and intimacy is distilled to pure connection. Mindful breath, gentle touch, and shared vulnerability. Remember that desire has always thrived in whispered corners and daring exchanges. As your eyelids grow heavy, trust in the tapestry you've woven tonight, a mosaic of rituals, poems, and secret symbols guiding you toward restful dreams. Sleep now carried by the soft current of history as candlelight flickers in distant rooms and the night air hums with unseen possibilities. Sweet dreams await.